تمشى بالحفر عالشوك عجلي وعلى النار.
بن بولعيد واسمو مصطفى، علي لطوانت وبدي عمر. القصبة ما زالها واقفة وما زالوا عساس الدار، ما زالها سعلة السقيفة وما زالها حرمة الجار. أنا يا بلادي راني عارف، هما ما كانوش عارفين.
دهشوا نهار علي ما توقف، احنا عادتنا نموت واقفين. نموت على النيف والشرف، نموت على الوطن والدين. علمنا بلا ريح يرفرف، احنا هما الجزائريين. أنا يا بلادي على بالي، هما ما كانوش فاهمين.
حبوا يديو البلاد ديالي، حسبونا ماناش قادرين. فكتهم حسيبة بنبوع علي الجميلة تونسى الأخرين. من حقك يا الجزائر تولولي ولدي نساو رجال حرين. أنا يا بلادي سمحيلي، ما قدرتش نذكرهم كاملين.
واش نذكر واش نخلي، شهداء رواحهم طاهرين. مازالهم في قلبي وفي بالي، ربي يرحمهم أجمعين. والقصبة مازالها ديالي، وسط الدار العرش واقفين.
معليش يا القصبة وريلهم
قرصان رياس وساطيل، على عروج وخير الدين احكي لهم.
وفهم الناس اللي جاهلين
بلي الجزائر ماهيش ليهم، ولادها مازالهم عايشين في وسط الناس. كيفاش تعرفهم في الشدة ديما متحدين.
بلي الجزائر ماشي ديالهم، ولادها مازالهم عايشين في وسط الناس. كيفاش تعرفهم في الشدة ديما متحدين.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Jazair Hope platform. Today we have with us Dr. Stephen Zunes from the US in San Francisco. Stephen is a professor of politics at San Francisco University. He specializes on the MENA region, Middle East and or North Africa. And he is also the writer of 3 books that we will have the chance to present in a few minutes. So thank you very much, Dr. Stephen, being with us this evening, and welcome to Jazair Hope platform.
It's good to be with you.
Thank you. So ladies and gentlemen, the talk today will be in English, but as usual, you can YouTube will allow for translation after a few hours. Of the end, for those who does not master English very well, they can listen to it later on also. Today the subject is about Western Sahara as announced, and what we would like to cover is from where this ideology of occupying territories stems for. So basically, we will talk mostly about Western Sahara, but we will try to do the parallel with what's happening in Palestine for that matter. As such, Doctor, I would like to start before speaking about Western Sahara. I would like to start by asking you about Gaza and what are your views of the situation there after 3 months of horrible war. How do you see things unfolding, especially that lately we have read and listened to many opinions who predict something extreme like a widespread global conflict, or that can lead to a nuclear war, or the beginning of the end of Israel, or the complete annexation of Gaza. So quite extreme scenarios this time around compared to the previous clashes, if I can call it like that.
Well, in many respects, the Israeli war on Gaza is even more vicious, even more terrible in terms of the humanitarian crisis. And thanks to new technologies and the ability of people around the world to see what's happening on the ground in real time, the horrors of the war are so much more visible to everyone. And similarly, the initial terrorist attack by Hamas was far worse than what they have committed either. So there's definitely been an escalation on both sides. So obviously Israel, with its extensive military capabilities and the support from the United States, has inflicted many, many, many times greater damage. So I think the horror of the war and the civilian casualties has captured the world's attention in a major way. And it also shattered the illusion of normalcy. The Israelis and their American supporters wanted to think, well, the status quo can last forever. I mean, Netanyahu was quite explicit, saying we don't have to think about or worry about the Palestinians. We can just ignore them and keep on colonizing the West Bank and keep on maintaining the siege on Gaza. But obviously, what happened on October 7th showed that no Israelis were safe. That it was that the status quo could not continue. Obviously, we should be concerned about the possibility of a broader war, but I don't think that's likely. And the reason is that both the Salafist, extremist Sunni groups and the Iran and allied Shia groups like Hezbollah, they're having a big propaganda victory from this. They've made it's now very difficult for more countries, Arab countries, to normalize relations with Israel, and the people of Islamic countries around the world are even more skeptical about close ties to Western nations, and indeed extremist ideologies grow in times of great horror and hardship. So politically, it is to the advantage of the Salafists and the Iranian allied Shias to basically just sit back and gain the propaganda victory. And they can say all the rhetoric they want. Maybe Hezbollah will lob a couple of rockets into northern Israel for show, but they know if they get into a full-scale war, Israel would come out doing a lot more damage. And so why risk all the casualties if they can get the political benefits by just sitting back and seeing the horror unfold, and have the Islamic world even more and more angry with Israel, even more and more angry with the United States, even more and more angry with West European countries, and even more angry at some of the Arab governments that were making nice with Israel.
Thank you for that, Stephen. And of course, we look forward to something positive anytime soon, because this horror cannot continue as is. I would like now to start. We start discussing our main topic, which is about Western Sahara. I show in the screen the book that you wrote on the subject. So, Western Sahara: War, Nationalism, and Conflict Resolution. So, just for the people to know you a little bit more, as I presented you as specializing on Middle East and North Africa, and particularly on the issue Western Sahara. If you can just tell us very quickly about this book, what is broadly the content and the purpose.
Well, it is the most comprehensive study of the Western Sahara conflict in English than we've had in 30, 35 years. We look at the history. We look at the rise of Sahrawi nationalism. We look at obviously Morocco and its imperial designs. We look at the role of Algeria, of the European countries, and particularly the role of the United States in terms of its critically important support. We examine the role of the United Nations, the African Union, and we look at both the armed struggle and the nonviolent resistance inside the occupied parts of Western Sahara. We look at the self-governance by the Polisario in the refugee camps near Tindouf. We cover very broad spectrum of issues and concerns. And, while it is an academic book, it's an objective book. We don't have an ideological agenda. We're not uncritical of any party in the conflict. The facts are very clear who the aggressor is. The facts are very clear about, in terms of human rights, in terms of international law, in terms of these basic principles, the role that Morocco and its allies are violating, very basic principles of international law. Indeed, we argue that this is why the reason Western Sahara is important is not just in terms of the rights of the Sahrawi people, not just in terms of regional security, in terms of the Maghreb, but what's important, the entire international legal system is at stake here. Because if Morocco can get away with annexing a territory seized by military force, if they can get away with denying the right of self-determination of a non-self-governing territory, it will be a very dangerous precedent. It will be the first time since the signing of the United Nations Charter, where a country has been able to get away with that. And so, though Morocco obviously has the upper hand right now in terms of occupying, nearly 80% of the territory and being protected by French and American vetoes at the United Nations and whatever, except for the United States and Israel, no country has formally recognized the takeover. And we need to prevent that from happening. We need the Sahrawis to have an act of self-determination, because to do otherwise would really, it would undercut the very basic principles of international law, which is held firm for most of the past 75, 80 years.
Absolutely. And look, Doctor, thank you very much for the book, because one of the issues we suffer from globally is the lack of awareness of this particular issue. And what I think a book on this topic in English will help make this issue well known to a lot of people around the world. So one of the questions I had stems from a debate I heard you recently saying that, and you described Western Sahara as, or the people of Western Sahara as having a history of freedom. So my question is, what is the anthropology of the Western Sahara people? from where they come, what is their culture, and so on. Because Morocco claims these are Moroccans, so we need to understand about the origin of the Western Sahara people.
Well, the specific boundaries of Western Sahara are based on the colonial boundaries divided between the Spaniards and the French. And like most colonial boundaries in Africa, the Middle East, and elsewhere, there's a degree of arbitrariness about them. However, the Sahrawi people, which who are the dominant ethnicity in Western Sahara, as well as parts of northern Mauritania and far western Algeria and far southern Morocco, they have a distinct dialect, culture, kinship system, cuisine, dress. I mean, you go down the list. They are like the Moroccans and Algerians. They're a mix of Arab and Berber background and are Sunni Muslims. But again, with their dialect and these other differences, they have a distinct culture. Indeed, and for things like women's rights, I mean, there's a tradition in the Western Sahara. The Sahrawi women have equal rights to inheritance and divorce. They actually are in leadership positions in both within the Polisario, and they're some of the most prominent faces in the nonviolent resistance in the occupied areas as well. Indeed, the Moroccans often singled out female activists for abuse and torture and sexual humiliation in Moroccan prisons. And so, indeed, if you just take, if you like I have taken a bus from Marrakesh down to El Ayoun, and as soon as you get south of the Draa River, you start noticing the differences. Even though I'm not fluent in either Hassaniya or Moroccan Arabic, you can tell immediately that you are in effect in a different country, a separate nation. And one aspect of the Sahrawis is that they historically are nomadic people. They were not. They were never under Ottoman rule. They never had a sultan or an emir. The Spanish rule, was they control the towns and the phosphate mines, but they didn't really control the interior until around 1957, and even then, there was a degree of benign neglect, I guess you could say. So the very heavy-handed role that Morocco is playing in the occupation isn't just repressive on any normal definition of repressive, but it's particularly difficult for the Sahrawis, who have always known a degree of freedom. And in fact, one thing that's really remarkable about the Polisario is that there have been a lot of national liberation struggles throughout Africa and the Middle East. And the nature of armed struggle often necessitates a fairly hierarchical authoritarian style of rule. Some of these movements were Marxist-Leninists and others that had that kind of ideology. But it's been remarkable how democratic the Polisario is. They have competitive elections for their president and for and they elect members of their assembly, things like that. There's open political discussion. There's a lot more even in the course of a national liberation struggle, where often differences of opinion are not tolerated. They've been very open, and these kinds of democratic processes. By contrast, if you look at the occupied parts of Western Sahara, I mean, I've been to 87 countries, including Iraq under Saddam Hussein and Indonesia under Suharto. I've been to communist countries. I've never seen a worse police state than the Moroccan occupied Western Sahara. There's a non-governmental organization in the United States called Freedom House, which monitors political freedom around the world. And if anything, they have a slightly pro-Western bias in terms of their methodology. But even they say that the Moroccan occupied Western Sahara has the least political freedom of any country in the world except for Assad's Syria. In other words, all countries in the world is a second to the worst, and that's saying quite a lot.
Yeah, thank you very much for stressing this, Doctor, because we know we have a lot of Moroccan friends, and they are completely disconnected from these realities because of the media, the Moroccan media, and also the global media. They, as I said, this issue is not very well known. It's not properly covered. So thank you very much for stressing that. And that's remind me to ask you a question about the settlement policy of the Moroccan government into Western Sahara, and also to ask you about the proportion about the Sahrawis that are under occupation versus those who are not. So I think talking about the settlement policy to start drawing the parallel with what's happening also in Gaza.
Yes. Well, the transfer of a civilian population on into territories under foreign belligerent occupation is a violation of Article 41 of the Fourth Geneva Convention. I mean, so it's a clear violation of international law. And we hear about it mostly in terms of the Israeli settlements. But Morocco has been doing it even more so. In fact, at this point, Moroccan settlers outnumber the indigenous Sahrawi population by a ratio of close to 3 to 1. And even if you counted all the Sahrawis and Tindouf refugee camps and elsewhere in Algeria and Europe and then Morocco and the diaspora, it's probably 3 to 2. What makes them different than the Israeli settlers in certain respects, though, is that a large percentage of the Israeli settlers are ideological settlers. These are Jewish fundamentalists who are there because in the West Bank because they believe it is God's will that they claim that land for the Jewish people. They're very fanatical and intent to stay. What I've noticed among the Moroccan settlers in Western Sahara is that they are there largely because of the tax breaks and the subsidies and the higher salaries that the Moroccan government is encouraging them to take advantage of. That they are, and that many of them still own their property in Casablanca or Tangier or Fez or wherever, and so they would be they'd be quite willing to move back if circumstances changed. They're not necessarily committed ideologically to the Moroccan occupation. In addition, a fairly large percentage of these settlers are actually ethnic Sahrawis from the Tafaya region of southern Morocco. So this is a part of that is legally, part of Morocco, but in terms of their ethnicity and dialect and other things, they are Sahrawis. And the government, and really pushing for the Moroccan government and pushing for colonization, pressured various tribal leaders to order many of their people to move into Western Sahara, to move further south, in many cases against their will. And so, they are not necessarily, supportive of the Moroccan government, and in fact are somewhat resentful. Indeed, that is probably the reason why the Moroccans rejected the second Baker Plan for a referendum, which, after a 5-year period of genuine autonomy, presumably under the Polisario, the people could vote to whether to become part of Morocco or independent, and the settlers would be allowed to vote. Now, I mentioned this a 3 to 2 ratio. That would seem to be very favorable to Morocco. But apparently the Moroccans were afraid that a lot of these settlers, particularly the ethnic Sahrawis from Tafaya, would vote for independence. And indeed, many Moroccan settlers, might say, under Polisario rules, saying, hey, there's less corruption, they're more efficient. There's more democracy. Maybe we'd rather be under the Polisario than we would the Moroccan regime ourselves. And so, what the problem, I think, with the biggest problem, the obstacle with the settlers right now, is that one of the more effective ways of challenging dictatorships or occupation has been civil resistance, massive nonviolent resistance. That's what gave brought independence to India, of course, during British colonialism there, the Baltic republics, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, under Soviet rule. If there's massive non-cooperation, you no longer recognize the legitimacy of a government. General strikes. We've seen how dictators, from the Philippines to Nepal to Chile to Serbia, have been brought down by this massive non-cooperation. But that only works if you're the majority of the population. If the settlers outnumber you, all the Sahrawis could have a general strike or whatever, but the majority of people would still be working, and the more important jobs are given to the settlers anyway. So the biggest problem with the settlements, the settlers, is that it has made civil resistance, which would normally be an effective means of resistance, that much more difficult. And frankly, I'm very disappointed that I'm very glad that the international community has been speaking out against Israeli settlements, that the United Nations Security Council, has had 5 resolutions condemning the settlements, and of course the General Assembly many more such resolutions, and it's mostly on people's awareness. But there's not been a similar reaction, similar awareness, similar condemnation to the Moroccan settlements, even though it's a much bigger issue, much far greater numbers, and far more politically significant.
Indeed, Stephen. And again, thank you very much for stressing this, because now I think we have talked about the second point where we can draw a parallel. First one was the culture of the population. So same thing in Palestine. There is an attempt to erase completely from the memories the Palestinian culture. The second point is the settlement. We will draw other parallels, but before that, I wanted to ask you, as a subject matter expert of this issue, how do you see the position of Algeria? As you know, Algeria always has claimed that it is not part of this conflict, though it supports the Western Sahara independence very strongly, as we have in Algeria supported, for example, South Africa against the apartheid, as we are supporting the Palestine in conflict. So while the Moroccan says that the issue is with Algeria and can be settled only through a dialogue with Algeria, so it's very important to hear a point of view of subject matter expert on this.
Yeah, this is something that is a very strong irritation for me, that there is this assumption that this is a battle between Morocco and Algeria. And obviously Morocco and Algeria do have a lot of issues of contention between them. I mean, that's a given. But and Western Sahara is one of them. But that this idea that somehow the Sahrawi freedom struggle is an Algerian creation is completely inaccurate, completely ahistorical. I mean, for one thing, when the Polisario was formed, the Algerian government was actually supporting a rival nationalist movement. So the origins of the Polisario are completely different. So it's certainly not a creation of Algeria, and that the and certainly the Polisario has gotten a lot of important support from Algeria, and that's important. They've got sanctuary in Tindouf. Algeria has helped support financially their diplomatic efforts and that kind of thing. They've been an important ally, but they're not a proxy. I mean, it's really important not to deny agency to to people in the struggle. I mean, if they were simply an Algerian creation, if the pro-independent Sahrawi were simply Algerian agents, why would Morocco be afraid to have a referendum?
Yeah.
You know, if it was, and they don't have a referendum because they know the vast majority of Sahrawis want independence. And, you know, if you look at, for example, the history of Eritrea, you know, the Soviet Union and Cuba were supporting the Eritrean struggle against Emperor Haile Selassie, who was a Western ally. But then when they had the coup in Ethiopia and the communist government came in power, the Soviets, you know, abandoned them and then switched to supporting Egyptians. But the Eritreans didn't give up; they kept on fighting, and they eventually won their independence. And so the thing is, if Algeria suddenly decide, I don't think this will happen, but let's say hypothetically, let's say Algeria dropped their support for the Polisario, it would definitely be a setback, but they would keep fighting because this is not about Algeria. This is about their freedom, you know, and this is the really key element. But the problem is that Algeria and its propagandists, including some of its supporters in the West, you know, have kept this myth, you know, that you know, they're simply proxies of the Algerian. I've been repeatedly called an Algerian agent, a paid Algerian agent, even though I've never gotten any money from the Algerian regime. I've been critical of the Algerian government and certain things, but I'm not. But you know, I do believe I think the Algerian government's right to support the freedom struggle in Western Sahara, just as they've been right to support the freedom struggle in South Africa and Palestine and elsewhere. And but the idea, you know, that the only reason I would support, you know, freedom, you know, for Western Sahara is that the Algerian government was giving me money or something like that, just shows just how ridiculous these charges are. I mean, I was very active in the anti-apartheid movement and around South Africa, very active in the Palestinian struggle. I support East Timor in their struggle against the Indonesian occupation. So I've been quite consistent. I don't need any money from any government for me to take a principled position in support of the right of self-determination.
Absolutely, and I can guarantee you and confirm that the Algerian government doesn't pay at all, and this is one maybe it's one of the issues. Look. Before we continue, Stephen, I just would like to remind the people who are following us that there is a small poll that they can answer. So the poll is at the top of the chat. So the question is very basic, very simple. Does the occupation of Western Sahara and Palestine stems from the same ideology? You can reply by yes, no, or not sure, I don't know. So you can find the poll at the top of the chat. And this take me to a third question, Stephen, is again, Morocco has been under occupation for many decades, and it is now colonizing another territory. Maybe it's not exactly a strong parallel with Israel, but we can still draw a comparison when we think about Israelis or Jews in general being victims of a lot of horrors before in Europe, in Germany mainly, and what they are doing to the Palestinians right now. So how can you explain this ambivalence of being or having been in the past colonized and trying to colonize another country? How can you explain this?
That is one of the paradoxes, of course. You know, Morocco was, like Algeria, was subjected to French colonialism, and Spaniards actually had some pieces of Morocco as well. And though they were allowed, a little bit of more autonomy than Algeria was, and the Sultan was allowed to remain in power, and to some degree, it was definitely a very oppressive, colonial period. And but what has been difficult is that the Moroccans have made the conquest of Western Sahara a key variable of their nationalist identity. And so Moroccans are afraid that if you if you question the occupation, therefore you're betraying the nationalist cause. That the idea that Morocco supposedly liberated Western Sahara from Spain, even though the Spaniards had were ready to give them independence. It perpetuates this kind of myth. And indeed, what's interesting is that some students at my university in a semester abroad, go to Morocco along with a number of other countries around the world, and what they're told before they leave is that you can talk politics in the cafe or whatever, but 3 things you can't do. Obviously, you can't insult Islam. You can't say anything negative about the royal family or question their finances or anything like that. And you can't talk about Western Sahara. Those are the 3 things that you just cannot say. And in Moroccan law, it is forbidden to question the territorial integrity of the nation, meaning the occupation. And so it is like politically quite risky to even talk about or even question Western Sahara. But in many ways, more problematically, is that a large number of Moroccans really believe it. Even Moroccans that are dissidents to the corruption and abuses of the government. Even Moroccans, who be on the left politically, who would be who maybe question the government recognizing Israel and their close alliance to the West. Even many of them buy the narrative around the Istiqlal, around the idea that Morocco means this grander territorial vision of Le Grand Maroc, and being able to control Western Sahara and maybe even more territory as well. And similarly, I think this is changing somewhat, but a lot of Jews around the world, who may have been pretty progressive on a lot of issues, may have been anti-apartheid in South Africa, opposed the Vietnam War, people of my generation who I have a lot of, pretty progressive Jewish friends who, when it came to Israel, and the Palestinians, they took a pretty hard line Zionist, perspective. And again, that's changing. The younger generation of Jews in the United States and Europe, elsewhere, are a lot more critical of Israel and even of Zionism itself. At least in my generation, there is more of that kind of thing. And it is similar in that they say, oh, we are historically, how can we be oppressors because we were oppressed? They can't really even envision, or it's just beyond their paradigm, and they can't quite imagine and see themselves in that way, given that very real history.
Absolutely. And there is one comment that I have put on the screen, which says that they have been brainwashed. And indeed, one of the answers is that, and for that matter, I know a lot of Moroccans of my generation who when I discuss with them, the main explanation I have is that since they were very, very young, when they started going to school at the age of 6 or 5, they have been explained that this part of the Sahara is theirs, and it became a reality very deeply in their brain. So they have been really, really brainwashed. So whatever they are, even if they have a critical spirit, if they have, I don't know, but this is part of the answer, I guess. My next question, Doctor, is again to mark another parallel, is about I don't know if you know this, but in the Moroccan constitution, when they talk about their borders, they talk about between parentheses the true borders. So they don't mention legal borders or international borders or what any other definition that we can measure or refer to. We think that with Israel, it's the only country in the world which constitution does not define clearly the borders. Considering other aspects like constantly adding settlers to the territories, altering the names, altering the culture, the history, we are really, really tempted to ask if both they are not the same. They don't stem from the same ideology, or maybe for that matter, it's the same people governing. So what is your say on this?
The parallels are quite striking in that regard. That they're embracing some dubious historical claims that somehow is more valid than international law. That they seem to almost be in a time capsule of a time when the right of conquest was legitimate rather than the right of self-determination, where the rule of force was more legitimate than the rule of law. And it's so it's kind of ironic that Israel and America's biggest supporters are Western nations that supposedly are the enlightened ones in terms of the rule of law and that kind of thing. That it's got countries like the United States that are helping to make these anachronistic views of statecraft, as acting like it's somehow legitimate. And I mean, the United States is quite willing to criticize that when Russia is using dubious historical claims in its war on Ukraine, and yet we self-righteously stand up for international law and self-determination in those cases, and yet when our allies do the same thing, we're willing to look the other way and say, oh, you need to work it out among yourselves. And that's ridiculous. I mean, when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, we didn't say, you two negotiate and figure out who should really control Kuwait. The United States led the effort in terms of reversing that. Personally, I don't think we should have gone to war. I think there could have been non-military ways of ending the Iraq's occupation. But clearly, the international community recognized that when you have such a gross asymmetry in power, and when clearly one side is the aggressor, the occupier, it's not a matter of splitting the difference. It's not a matter of just kind of both sides coming together, because you have to recognize the gross asymmetry in power, and you have to recognize who has the rule of law on their side, and that is a critical thing that we don't mention. I want to respond to some little comment that came in here. Which I think I may have misread it, but it seemed to imply that U.S. policy was basically controlled by the Zionists. I would disagree with that, in the sense that I think the very fact the United States supports Morocco's occupation of Western Sahara, in fact, even more so than it does Israel, because Israel and the United States has recognized small parts of Israel's annexation. They haven't recognized the entire West Bank as being annexed, but we have legally recognized all of Western Sahara as part of Morocco. So if anything, we support Morocco even more than we do Israel in certain ways. And the thing it shows that the United States doesn't need a Zionist lobby to support an occupation. We support Indonesia's occupation of East Timor. We used our veto power several times, the United Nations Security Council, to protect apartheid South Africa for sanctions over its occupation of Namibia. The United States, unfortunately, is perfectly capable of supporting an ally invade, occupy, colonize, and oppress a weaker nation without a minority group, pressing us to do so. And remember, U.S. support for the occupation did not start with the Moroccan recognition of Israel and Israel's big support for Morocco. It goes way back to the very beginning in 1975, when Henry Kissinger pressured the Spaniards against their better judgment to renege on the promise for self-determination and to sign the Madrid Accord. So this goes way back. This is not certainly there is a powerful Zionist lobby in the United States. I've had talks canceled. There's some censorship, and it's harder to fight the policies because of the Zionist lobby. But the U.S. policy would be more or less the same, frankly, towards Israel and Palestine, because we don't support self-determination. In fact, here's a very interesting point I want to make. U.S. excuse for not demanding an end to the Israeli occupation is that some Palestinian groups engage in terrorism. Some of them don't recognize Israel's right to exist. They're not democratic, and their leadership is divided. But let's look at Western Sahara. They have unified leadership under the Polisario. They've never engaged in terrorism. They've never questioned Morocco's right to exist. They're relatively democratic. So it kind of shows that even if the Palestinians did all these things that the United States says they should do, that's no guarantee they're going to support their self-determination. Because if that was the case, why don't we recognize Western Sahara's right of self-determination?
Which is very unfortunate for that matter, because if it was just a matter of a lobby, maybe it's gonna be easier to
exactly. I wish it was just a lobby, but it's much more. I mean, this is part of the larger U.S. imperialist, and militarist worldview. I mean, this is the same mentality that got us to these terrible wars in Vietnam and Central America and Iraq. This is support for Israel and Morocco are again part of this overall imperialist world view that the United States has had, for many decades, and so that, and I think it's really important to see it in that broader context.
Thank you very much for clarifying this point, and thank you for the guy who has put the comment to give us this opportunity to clarify this. So before asking you the last question, we have done now 46 minutes. I would like to present the results of the poll, and we will react to it. So it's bluntly a big majority that says that the both occupation of Western Sahara and Palestine stems from the same ideology, which I'm tempted to call as the Zionist ideology. So I don't know, what is your opinion on this, Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the specifics are different. I mean, the Israelis, would just as soon expel all the Palestinians or destroy them, whereas the Moroccans, if they could get away with it, they'd probably try to assimilate, the Sahrawis and try to turn them into Moroccans. So there's that distinction in certain respects. But in terms of this ideologically driven imperialist idea, the idea that somehow that people through God or through destiny or history have a right to deny people their right of self-determination, to usurp their land, to colonize, their land, and this is a the parallels there are indeed quite striking, but it also this also leads to an opening that the world has been really woken by the nature of the what the Israelis are doing, and the Zionist ideology taken to this kind of extreme that we see the horrors unfolding in Gaza. I am seeing, especially among younger people, my students, my children, their friends. So, they're all just, really mobilized politically and really outraged, including many young American Jews, saying, "Not in my name." I mean, there's a huge outpouring in the United States, around the world, in solidarity with the Palestinians. This is an opening for those of us who care about Western Sahara. This is an opening where we can say, yes, let's continue to support Palestine, but there's this other occupation as well. We need the Sahrawis deserve our solidarity just as much as the Palestinians do, and this is an opportunity to raise awareness around the world.
Thank you very much for stressing on this, Doctor. Matter of fact, as you are saying, you certainly heard about this study that has been done by the Harvard University Harris Institute, which has questioned Americans on Palestine current issue. And when you look at the age categories, so the category between 18 to 25 years old, they have answered completely different from the other categories.
I've never seen any issue that parallels age and political attitude so perfectly, so it's a straight line.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you very much for stressing the fact that this is a window opportunity for the Western Sahara issue to have the same support as soon as possible in the future? My last question, and then I have like 4 or 5 questions from the people, but all of them, the 5 questions are more or less around the same point. I will ask you my last question, and then I will show you that point from the people. So, do you see this strategy of forcefully occupying territories succeeding? And has it succeeded in the past? What are the chances that it succeeds, and what are the risks if it succeeds?
I mean, certainly we have seen conquest, succeed, if you will, in the against indigenous peoples, obviously, in the United States, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and elsewhere. But most of these were during colonial periods. This is before the modern era, before the United Nations Charter. That I think that with the kind of both the legal principles and the universally accepted moral principles underscoring these legal principles, it seems very difficult for countries to get away with this quite in the same manner. And that we have with modern communication technologies, people know about these struggles. So international solidarity can be an important way. I mean, just the ability of Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank and Sahrawis in the occupied territories just to pick up their phones and film what is going on and instantaneously be seen all around the world. You can't get away with massacres in silence. That the governments can't get away with denying the level of repression. And so that we're a much more interdependent world now. And so these people are not struggling alone. They have this international solidarity. So I believe that ultimately Morocco will not succeed. Israel will not succeed. Eventually, inshallah, the Sahrawis and the Palestinians will have their freedom. The question is, how long will it take? How many people will have to die first? But they will win. They will win.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Stephen. And matter of fact, another reason why they will succeed and they should succeed, according to me, it's unlike the cases that you have mentioned in the US or North America or Australia and New Zealand. What is a little bit different is that Palestine and Western Sahara, those issues are happening in the middle of ethnically and religiously and culturally very homogeneous populations around them, which is a little bit different than in the past.
Exactly.
Yeah. Look, I have like 5, 6 questions, but matter of fact, they are all one question, okay? Which it is around what would be the solution. So I will read them. It will take me maybe 2 or 3 minutes to read them. So expansionist regimes draw their strength from ideologies which all come together and lead to the same result: occupation of territories, enslavement of people. How can we explain this historically? Knowing that the world has institutions designed to protect states and human rights. The second question is, shouldn't the USA be kicked out of the UN? And the third question, if it were not to the infiltration of the United Nations General Assembly and Security Council by Western imperialism and lobbies, Palestine and Western Sahara would have been liberated. The question is, should this old and infiltrated organization be reconsidered? So it's the same spirit.
A couple just basically about the United Nations.
Let me add this one. Let me just add this one because it talks about the BRICS. Can the BRICS dynamic really relaunch the reconfiguration of the world and redefine the nature of relation between states, restore the rights of people to self-determination, restore the power? And then another one, shall we remove the veto from the US? So it's around the same.
Certainly should remove the veto. I don't know how realistic it is. Similarly, I don't think the United States can be kicked out of the United Nations either. Unfortunately, it's the best thing we have at this stage in history. But we talk about the BRICS. I mean, on the one hand, it's hard to object to any counter to U.S. and Western hegemony. At the same time, Russia, China, India, they've engaged in pretty oppressive and illegal policies and themselves, so it's not like they are, necessarily virtuous either in terms of human rights and international law, particularly in their treatment of Muslim peoples, So I think really ultimately the answer does go to global civil society. I mean, that's how we ended apartheid in South Africa. That's how we ended South Africa's occupation of Namibia. It's how we ended Indonesia's occupation of East Timor. It's how we ended the Vietnam War. It's how we brought peace to Central America. And you look at all these issues, that it's critically important, for global civil society to be involved. And the fact that international law is on our, we talk about what's the use of international law when it's being ignored by the powerful. Well, what it allows, though, is a reference point for global civil society to say, hey, you talk about rule of law when it comes to Russia and Ukraine. How about in Western Sahara? How about in Palestine? We can use the UN resolutions, the frameworks, the international law, the UN Charter as vehicles, for raising consciousness and raising awareness. Because we're not talking about anything radical here. We're talking about very basic, fundamental, kind of 20th century Western liberal, ideals that supposedly our governments, support. So when Biden says it's all about a rule-based international legal order, said, yeah, right. So why are you doing this? Using the what I'd love to see, for example, and we're seeing some of this already, but we need to expand the boycotts, divestment, sanctions movement targeting Israel to target Morocco as well. And to
that's a great idea. I will work on it, because I have invited the BDS representative twice, but that is a good idea. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah, and in fact, it wouldn't be spreading it too thin either, because Western Sahara, I mean, there are other, countries that one could argue morally have the right of self-determination, Chechnya, West Papua, Kashmir, Tibet, whatever. But legally speaking, Western Sahara and Palestine are the only two nation states that are being denied their right of self-determination by foreign belligerent occupation. And so adding Western Sahara would not be opening the floodgates to a lot of other things. And it actually strengthened the BDS campaign in Palestine, because when people would say, oh, why are you singling out the world's only Jewish state? I say, no, Morocco's an Arab Muslim state. We're boycotting that too, for the same reasons, that you cannot invade and occupy and oppress and colonize your neighbors. So it would be strengthen both movements if the Palestine Solidarity movement and the Western Sahara Solidarity movement could join forces on BDS and other actions.
Thank you very much, Stephen. We are right at 58 minutes. I particularly liked the point about the civil society, about the point we spoke a little bit earlier about the young generations and the impact we hope they will have in the future when they will be in decision-making positions. And the key point is awareness, as you said.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thank you very much, Stephen. It was a pleasure speaking to you. You shared with us a perspective that is extremely important for us here in Algeria. I hope that we will have another opportunity to speak again. If you need anything from Algeria, please do not hesitate to contact me.
Okay. Thank you very much. You're very welcome.
Thank you. And thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for following us. As I said in the beginning, for those who do not master English, in few hours after the close of this live, you can activate the translation in YouTube. So I thank you for your participation, constructive comments, and look forward to have you again very soon in a couple of or 3 days. Thank you, guys. Bye.
احنا الشعب اللي تمشى بالحفاظ، عالشوك عجلي وعلى النار.
بن بولعيد واسمو مصطفى، علي لابوانت وبدي عمر، القصبة ما زالها واقفة وما زالوا عساس الدار، ما زالها سعلة السقيفة وما زالها حرمة الجار. أنا يا بلادي راني عارف هما ما كانوش عارفين،
دهشوا نهار علي ما توقف، احنا عادتنا نموت واقفين، نموت على النيف والشرف، نموت على الوطن والدين، علمنا بلا ريح يرفرف، احنا هما الجزائريين. أنا يا بلادي على بالي هما ما كانوش فاهمين،
حبوا يديو البلاد ديالي، حسبونا ماناش قادرين، فكتهم حسيبة بنبوع للجميلة ونسى الآخرين، من حقك يا الجزائر تولولي ولدتي نساو رجال حرين. أنا يا بلادي سمحيلي ما قدرتش نذكرهم كاملين،
واش نذكر واش نخلي شهداء رواحهم طاهرين، مازالهم في قلبي وفي بالي، ربي يرحمهم أجمعين، والقصبة مازالها ديالي وسط الدار والعرس واقفين.
معليش يا القصبة وريلهم
قرصان رياس وساطيل، على عروج وخير الدين احكي لهم،
وفهم الناس اللي جاهلين،
بلي الجزائر ماهيش ليهم ولادها مازالهم عايشين في وسط الناس، كيفاش تعرفهم في الشدة ديما متحدين،
باللي الجزائر ماشي ديالهم ولادها مازالهم عايشين في وسط الناس، كيفاش تعرفهم في الشدة ديما متحدين.